must play a part. Allah looks not at how you look, but what is in your heart.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like to talk today about Islam, terrorism and jihad. Not the most easiest of words for a lot of the world to digest, and there's a lot of misconceptions around these words. And I just wanted to go over a little bit of brief history, a little bit of media twisting, a little bit of spin to try to dispel some of the myths. I want to be absolutely clear about this in case anyone's got any doubt whatsoever. Muslims want peace with everybody. Jews, the Christians, the Hindus, the Sikhs, everybody, we want peace. People of no faith as well. Atheists, that's fine. They've got every right to that. Even in our greetings, we say Assalamu alaikum to each other. It means may peace be upon you. And we mean it when we say it. Anybody who knows the Muslims know this is probably the most repeated phrase between Muslims. But the problem is we live in a world of oppression and a misuse of terminology, most often by the media. And this oppression includes Muslims being slaughtered all over the world. Mass graves found in Yugoslavia, almost all of them Muslim. And what about Chechnya, Palestine? What's happening in Iraq and Afghanistan? In Afghanistan, when it was fighting with the Russians, it was about 80, not 18, 80 Afghans killed for every Russian. But still, they were fighting against this oppression. And it makes you wonder, who is next? Is it going to be Sudan? Iran? Venezuela now, maybe? This misuse of terminology has really led to the Muslims being killed on a false pretense. And when some splinter groups resist this killing, this unjust killing, they are called Islamic terrorists. They're not called resistance fighters, as the heroes of the French resistance are commonly known from the Second World War. And the media are really using this misuse of terminology to gain public support for unjust actions. For example, slogans such as "wanted, dead or alive." How can you say this? This is not the Wild West. It's the 21st century, and we have phrases being passed around by world-leading politicians like "wanted, dead or alive." How can this be just? How can they get away with this? Whatever happened until innocent, until proven guilty? When you have an old man in a wheelchair assassinated on the steps of the mosque on his way to and from prayer, what about a trial? Surely anybody deserves this. Yes, if there's an accusation, you have a trial, you have an investigation, then see what the outcome is. And what about the so-called enemy combatants kept in Guantanamo Bay, kept for years? No access to a lawyer. What's happening about these people? Kept on a foreign part, a supposed foreign part of the USA, to get around their laws? This is, again, a major injustice. How can we allow this to happen? For example, the Iraq War. Where are the weapons of mass destruction? There's nothing. They wasn't found. When you have a leading member of parliament from the UK resign his job over this unjust invasion of Iraq, and then he falls off a Welsh mountain, and you have a leading weapons inspector apparently commit suicide, I guess the people have to think for themselves whatever is the truth, whatever they believe is true. And it seems now that the media is looking for the worst examples amongst the Muslims and are portraying them as like a normal Muslim, like this is what a typical snapshot of the Muslim men are like, or women. And it's not accurate at all. Some of these people, they were thrown out of the mosque for what they have said, for the trouble they were causing. Now, just because you have a band of people following them and they pray on the middle of the street, people think, oh, they're bringing it to our doorstep. They want us to see them, all this trouble they are causing. This is a tiny, tiny splinter group. You don't realize or get to hear of all the many, many millions of Muslims sat at home with their head in their hands, or praying, saying, oh my goodness, what must the world think of us? When people like this are singled out for attention, to be on parade. So the question you have to ask yourself is, why would the media do this? What is the reason? Support and to sway public opinion. This public opinion being used against the fictitious enemy. Do you remember the attitude towards the communists of Russia just a few years ago? Where's that now? It's gone. They're now our neighbours. Europe is opening up. Maybe now is a good time to talk about democracy when we talk about swaying public opinion. Because these people have a vote. They have a say in affairs. They get to choose who their leaders are. So it's for no small reason why this is happening by the media. Even there's demonstrations in so many places around the world against the invasion of Iraq. But it continued. It went ahead. Two countries decided to do it alone. Are they facing international war crimes for this? No, they are not. The United Nations, are they bringing them to trial? Not yet. So this democracy, is it working? What about when they had one of the first votes in Iraq and they asked the people what they want? And 60% said they want Sharia law because they know what it is. It's not some barbaric thing, taking away people's rights. Far from it. It's giving people their rights. It's protecting people's freedom. And these people know it. That's why 60% of them says that's what they want. And he was told, no, you can't have that. Still on the topic of democracy. What about homosexuality in the USA? Just because a church has a congregation with a very high percentage of people with this inclination, then they want to have a vote. And because there's more of them that thinks it's okay than not, they want to have their leader be like this as well. Does God allow this? No way. The people who know their Bible, who read it, they know this can't be allowed. But still, if enough people say they want it, they put it to the vote. And they think, oh, well, democracy must be the answer, so they go ahead. And look what division that is causing, even within the church. With the Muslims, we would never allow this one. This issue is clear cut. Even if so many of the people wanted it, we would say they are not Muslims. But because the word Muslim means you submit to the will of Allah, the will of God. What about when one of the most powerful nations in the world, apparently, has one of the most controversial elections in the world? It took about a month to work out who had won it. The man with the most votes, he didn't get to be president. He went to somebody else. They were celebrating initially. Technicality, apparently. Do you give the people a choice today? Will they make the same choice? And Pontius Pilate, he gave them the option. Who do you want to be released? Jesus or Barabbas? Do you think the people today, they would vote differently? I don't know. Maybe. So what you have to ask yourself is democracy working? Obviously, people have the right to their opinion. But just because so many people apparently say, yes, we're going to do this thing, does that mean to say that it should go ahead? Surely our world leaders should have the wisdom to override, for example, the case of Jesus and Barabbas. But I guess that's for people to work out what they think is right. Even there was a well-known Prime Minister quoted as saying, I'm determined to get this bill through. Even though he lost democratically in terms of trying to pass the legislation that he wanted to pass, the language that was used is, he's determined to get it through. So even though the people says, no, they don't want this legislation, he was determined to push it through. So it seems that democracy is okay as long as it's in line with the overall grand plan of some people, or to achieve a certain ambition. Now getting back to terminology, why Islamic terrorist? This is a media invented term. In Northern Ireland, when the UK had big political problems there, and some people resorted to violence and putting bombs all over the place and causing such terrorism, they were never called Christian terrorists. They were never called Catholic terrorists, as far as I'm aware. In the disputed region of Kashmir, between India and Pakistan, do you ever hear the phrase Hindu terrorist? No. It seems reserved for Muslims. Even back to the Crusades so many centuries ago, How many people say Christian terrorists? They don't. Nation react when it is invaded and its people are killed, its innocent people are killed. The women, the children, old men, suspected insurgents. This is the terminology we hear. Somebody is killed on a suspicion that they have a bad intention. An intention is not a crime. You may have a bad feeling. I think anybody would have a bad feeling if their nation was invaded. What about the USA feeling when Pearl Harbor was attacked? So what you have to say is, what's the definition of a terrorist? The United Nations couldn't get past this. They couldn't define to say, what is a terrorist? To start the war on terror and to bring those to justice who are causing mischief in the world. As the Muslims would want to achieve. We want to bring everybody who's causing mischief in the world to justice, because we're supposed to fight against an injustice, as any right-minded person would do if their country was invaded, their family and neighbours were killed. Everybody has a right to stand up and fight for justice. There are some nations in the world putting a seemingly unlimited resource into developing robot killing machines. This is even on documentaries on Sky TV channels. Seem to be bragging about how more efficiently they can kill people without even having to be there in person. Spy planes, remote controlled vehicles, all designed to be able to kill people without the people who's doing the killing being at apparent risk. Does it sound like a just world to allow this kind of thing to happen? It doesn't pass the logic test. Some of the countries who are losing their military personnel see it as a bad public relations exercise. It seems that they're not complaining about how much it's costing. They're just bothered about how many families are now not going to vote for them, and how many distant relatives and friends are swayed by this because they've lost somebody unjustly they love and care about. They are saying it's not just. And it seems that nations are prepared to put in any amount of expense, but they just don't want their lives to be lost, the bad PR. So maybe we're heading towards a Terminator kind of future. I don't want to see fiction. It's maybe a glimpse of the future. If you look at the trajectory of what is the direction the research is going in, the military research, is very unfortunate, and not the right way for the world to be spending its hard-earned resources on. Brothers and sisters in Islam, inshallah, we'll be back after a short break. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters in Islam. Welcome back. I'd like to continue our discussion on Islam, terrorism and jihad, inshallah. Now, getting back to terminology. Why Islamic terrorist? This is a media invented term in Northern Ireland, when the UK had big political problems there, and some people resorted to violence and putting bombs all over the place and causing such terrorism. They were never called Christian terrorists. They were never called Catholic terrorists, as far as I'm aware. In the disputed region of Kashmir, between India and Pakistan, do you ever hear the phrase Hindu terrorist? No. It seems reserved for Muslims. Even back to the Crusades so many centuries ago. How many people say Christian terrorists? They don't. Again, reserved just for Muslims, it seems. So how would any nation react when it is invaded and its people are killed, its innocent people are killed? The women, the children, old men, suspected insurgents. This is the terminology we hear. Somebody is killed on a suspicion that they have a bad intention. An intention is not a crime. You may have a bad feeling. I think anybody would have a bad feeling if their nation was invaded. What about the USA feeling when Pearl Harbor was attacked? So what you have to say is, what's the definition of a terrorist? The United Nations couldn't get past this. They couldn't define to say, what is a terrorist? To start the war on terror and to bring those to justice who are causing mischief in the world. As the Muslims would want to achieve. We want to bring everybody who's causing mischief in any right-minded person would do if their country was invaded, their family and neighbours were killed. Everybody has a right to stand up and fight for justice. There are some nations in the world putting a seemingly unlimited resource into developing robot killing machines. This is even on documentaries on Sky TV channels. Seem to be bragging about how more efficiently they can kill people without even having to be there in person. Spy planes, remote controlled vehicles, all designed to be able to kill people without the people who's doing the killing being at apparent risk. Does it sound like a just world to allow this kind of thing to happen? It doesn't pass the logic test. Some of the countries who are losing their military personnel see it as a bad public relations exercise. It seems that they're not complaining about how much it's costing. They're just bothered about how many families are now not going to vote for them, and how many distant relatives and friends are swayed by this because they've lost somebody unjustly they love and care about. They are saying it's not just. And it seems that nations are prepared to put in any amount of expense, but they just don't want their lives to be lost, the bad PR. So maybe we're heading towards a Terminator kind of future. I don't want to seem negative at all, but it doesn't seem so much like science fiction. It's maybe a glimpse of the future. If you look at the trajectory of what is the direction the research is going in, the military research, way for the world to be spending its hard-earned resources on. So coming on to nuclear weapons, the same countries that's developing these robotic killers are also developing the next generation of nuclear weapons and telling to other nations they don't have the right to develop their own defense systems, even though they have it themselves. Now, to me, this comes across like a bully, and it doesn't sound like justice at all. Many nations, they have at least the right, many people have the right to speak out against this and say, this is not just, and we should unite together and say, we don't want to be a part of this. The Muslims don't want to develop a nuclear weapon. Why would they? What possible use is it? You will send a weapon at the touch of a button to civilians in a town in another nation because its leaders make a very stupid decision. What's the justice in that? How can somebody innocent pay the price for what somebody guilty has done? Yeah, maybe some of those people elected their leaders, but not all of them. So if there's one innocent person, how could a Muslim press the button and initiate this horrible sequence of events? The only country which has used nuclear weapons against another nation is the one with the biggest bully boy tactics, telling to other nations they don't have the right to develop nuclear technology, even though they say they don't even want a weapon, they want the energy resource. Anybody in the right mind would say that they have the right to do that. So really, to try and summarize up, what you have to say is, if the nations that are expanding their militaries, next generation nuclear weapons, lasers in space, and whatever else is coming next, if they would just put those resources, or even part of them, into having good relations with the rest of the world, then I think these countries would find they have good friends and neighbours. If these nations who are putting so much effort into upgrading their military hardware, expanding their nuclear arsenal, if they put the same effort into good relations, then surely this is money well spent. This is effort well spent. It's in the right direction. And this is what the Muslims are trying to do. You see, we have a peace conference, and we're not afraid to talk about the terms I initially spoke of, about jihad and terrorism, and how these terms are being misused. Any Muslim in his right mind knows that jihad is a part of Islam. If the media want to misuse this word and make it like a swear word, then they have tainted the truth. Because this is not the situation at all. Every Muslim, I think, would define the term jihad more as a struggle. Maybe you're struggling with issues within yourself. Maybe people are struggling with their prayers. Maybe people are struggling with their fasting. They could be struggling within their marriage. You could be struggling at all sorts of issues. But it's a struggle. And if that struggle means you defend your family if somebody's trying to kill you, or turf you out of your home on the land that your grandparents were born in, there doesn't seem justice at all. You've got to be allowed to fight for your rights in desperate situations. And this is what people are doing. They are being pushed into such a desperate situation that some of them, a splinter group, react. And for example, if one of them reacts in one of the countries which is being oppressed and invaded, I'm not saying it's right, but if one person does it, what, the whole village gets blanket bombed? That's what's happening now, not just in one country. Why aren't more people reacting to this? More people should be saying this is wrong. Like I said before, the Muslims wouldn't do this. As in the Muslims, those that submit to the will of Allah, those that are following Islam, this definition of the word Muslim, they wouldn't dream of doing this. How could they? Maybe there's their own prisoners there. There's certainly innocent people amongst those being bombed. No doubt about it. And the people authorizing these attacks and those who are carrying them out, they are both guilty. They've got blood on their hands. And we have every right to speak up against it and say this is not right. And it also comes back then to the definition of what the United Nations was trying to achieve, whereby saying, who are the terrorists? So surely if these nations put their efforts into good relations, we have a better and a safer world, safer for everybody, not just for the Americans, not for the non-Muslims, not for the Muslims, for everybody. This is the kind of world that the Muslims want to aim for, inshallah. So I think the Muslims would be more inclined to say, would you join us in our jihad? Now we have defined the term. Join us in this struggle against the troublemakers, the mischief makers of the world, and say, we want to vote against it. They believe in democracy, then we'll say, okay, enough of us together say, we don't want this. We don't want innocent people being killed. They claim to believe in democracy, so let's put it to the test. Ask the people of Palestine, do they want what's going off in their country? Put it to the democratic vote, if they are sincere with what they say. So in summary, the Muslims are striving for a just and safe world where everybody has the freedom to practice their religion, or not at all if that's what they want, if that's what they think is best. They have that right. Don't mix up the terms. Don't let the media dissuade you by mixing up jihad with war on terror. Just work out for yourselves who are the terrorists and who are the ones clearly following their religion, speaking out against oppression, as everybody should do. So finally, don't let the media continue to divide people or sway people one way or another with their misuse of this terminology. Surely it's better we are friends and not as enemies. I think most people in the world want this. So let's put democracy to the test and see a show of hands, and we'll get this one finished, inshallah. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.